Discussion in public.
Ready to go. Welcome everybody to the Vale Whitehorse District Council Cabinet meeting on the 10th of October 2025. We're here at Abbey House. I have the Vale Cabinet in front of me. One apology, which we will get to, and we have various people in the room and online. We are here to discuss quite a full agenda. So I will get started. Chair's announcements. Item number 1 is usually the emergency exit. I'm sure you all know the emergency exit by now, but if you don't, please just follow Candida as if necessary, and we can assemble outside. 2 apologies for absence. I believe there's one, Councillor Fulsham. So that's noted. Item number 3, minutes. Has everybody who was present at the last meeting read through the minutes, and are we happy to note them as a truly accurate record? Yeah. Thank you very much. Item number 4, declarations of interest. We have a hand from Councillor Crawford.
I just wanted to remind Cabinet that I'm the board member for Charlton, which is where the Scottish Leisure Centre is with the decarbonisation project. I don't think I had some advice, but I don't think I'm in any way affected.
Mr. Bennett has popped up on screen.
I'm content. I'm aware of advice, so I'm quite content that the councillor can stay in the room, having made the declaration, can stay in the room and debate and in the normal way.
Thank you. So item number 5, urgent business. I don't believe there's any urgent business to discuss. Item number 6, public participation, and I believe Councillor Sarah James is online and would like to speak. Hi, Sarah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. You've got 3 minutes. If that's
thank
okay.
you very much. Yeah. So I'm here to speak about item 13, the report on progress towards net zero in the Vale of the Whitehorse. I'm here today to urge you to double down on reducing carbon emissions across our district. The reporting today on items 12 and 13 shows what excellent progress has been made on carbon emissions, but also lays bare the substantial gap to what is needed. The evidence now for the need to reduce emissions to net zero is overwhelming, as is the evidence of the risks that we're running, all humans on this planet, if we don't manage to reduce emissions to net zero. And the number and scale of impacts that we can expect and are already beginning to see is pretty overwhelming. And it can feel overwhelming just to know that this is happening. The council now has only a short time to act, as local government in this area will be reorganised. Let's see this short time as a spur to look again at everything we can do to reduce carbon emissions across our district, rather than feeling that we don't have time to do anything. So, for example, I work for a fuel poverty charity, and making homes more energy efficient is particularly dear to my heart. How can we help homeowners and landlords improve building efficiency? What can we do to make sure our residents have good information about the planning requirements and the grants to help them? Our website is actually excellent on this, but do residents know that? Could we facilitate bulk buying of solar PV or other measures to accelerate take-up of these technologies? We can enforce minimum energy efficiency standards in the rental market. But again, do our residents know this, and do they know how to seek our help? Transport is a sector with the highest emissions in the UK. And although transport doesn't sit with the council, we do still have important influence in this area. For example, we could charge more for car parking, particularly as bus fares have gone up substantially in the last year. A report to this cabinet in January showed positive environmental impact from increasing fees, but that option wasn't taken up at the time. But we could look at that again. We could consider higher fees for more polluting or heavier vehicles, which is something that other councils have looked at and some have implemented. Planning has a big impact on transport options, we could nudge county officers perhaps for a response on things like cycle parking facilities where the county council standards have not been followed. I've had to do this in my ward, I know. The Climate Action Fund that goes to groups in our area who are doing great work has supported fantastic projects. Really good to see the list of what the fund has gone to this year announced recently. It was oversubscribed again this year. We could increase the fund next year whilst we still have a chance and time to do this. So I'd just like to urge Cabinet today to have a really full discussion on both of the net zero reports in front of you and celebrate the successes, but also explore every avenue to do more, because we are running out of time in the sense of climate change and in the amount of time we have as council to make a difference. It is urgent and we haven't got long to act. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James, and I would invite anybody who has any questions or comments on Councillor James' statement. No, I very much appreciate what you're saying, Sarah, and yes, the urgency both at both levels is important. And as you can see, there's a lot of work in train, but that doesn't mean to say that there's not simple nudges that might be able to be taken on board to see if we could improve things even further. So thank you for coming along. Councillor Clegg, I believe, is going to be speaking as well. So we will go on to item number 7, recommendations and updates from other committees, and I will ask Councillor Clegg to come to the table. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, colleagues, for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I speak in my capacity as the chair of the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee, CEAC, since several of the items on the meeting's agenda are rather relevant. On item 11, the Oxfordshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy, that was considered by CEAC at a task and finish group meeting in November, back when it was still in consultation stage. And so we reviewed an earlier version of the document than that which you have for you today. I'm afraid I don't have extensive notes of that meeting. I wasn't CEAC chair yet at that time, and I'm afraid I can't find a meeting recording. But from what I can recollect, we were largely happy with the strategy document, but we put forward recommendations for improvement on specific details. I've now checked this final version, and indeed all of the issues that I can remember have been addressed. And I also emailed all CEAC members to ask their thoughts. Haven't received any responses that contradict my assessment. I therefore agree with the recommendation that this strategy be approved for publication. Next, on this council's progress towards operational net zero, I'm pleased to see our continued commitments to reduce emissions despite the challenging context of tight budgets and local government reorganisation. As Councillor James already mentioned, we are making significant progress, but we should also acknowledge that the speed of the progress isn't quick enough. I applaud the Vale's efforts in decarbonising our leisure centres and wholeheartedly agree with the recommendation on item 9 that further funds should be allocated towards completing the projects in Abingdon and in Wantage. One thing I'd like to pick up on in the paper for item 12, the operational net zero progress reports, is that waste collection vehicles are a significant source of our remaining emissions. Electrification of larger vehicles is not yet practical, given the current technology and the rural nature of our area, and that this poses a large stumbling block to us meeting our aims. I recently attended a presentation by the leader of Dorset Council, a similarly rural area where they have also concluded that electrification of large waste collection vehicles does not work. Instead, they have adopted hydro-treated vegetable oils, HVO, as a low carbon alternative to diesel. That we could potentially follow Dorset in this approach is already written into our joint waste and street cleansing vehicle procurement strategy, joint with South Oxfordshire, and I would strongly encourage Cabinet to keep this option in mind. I know that HVO has its downsides, slightly greater costs and some concerns over unsustainable plant oils making their way into the supply chain, but the upside will be a large reduction in our carbon footprint. Some things to consider, potentially revisit in the light of this report, but I wouldn't want this to get in the way of Cabinet accepting the recommendations that the papers for items 12 and 13 be accepted today. That's all from me. Give me time.
Thank you very much, and we really appreciate you coming along, because climate and the environment does feature very heavily in this agenda. Councillor Gascoigne is going to be basically your show for a lot of the cabinet meeting. Can I ask if there's any comments or questions, Councillor Smith?
Yeah, thank you very much for coming, Councillor Clegg, and for all the work of the committee as well to review. Yeah, it must have been quite a busy period over the last few months with the committee as well. I just wondered, in terms of the local nature recovery strategy, when you and the task and finish group were looking at that, you mentioned that there had been some changes or improvements or things that you were happy with. Could you give a few examples of that? What sorts of things might have changed?
Absolutely, a couple of examples spring to mind. So one was around hedgerows. There was already a section on hedgerows. These are really important ecological habitats. They act as corridors, essentially. But there was no detailed guidance given on hedgerow trimming techniques. So there are a wide variety of ways that you can trim down hedgerows. And a commonly used one is flail head trimming. So a tractor has an arm, and this flail spins around and it chops the branches off. It's very cost effective, but it's also quite destructive and is a bit of an eyesore, frankly. I'm pleased to see that in the new version of the report, there are links to third-party websites which have quite detailed and exhaustive guidance on hedgerow trimming techniques. A second example is around the ecological status of our waterways. There was no explicit mention of Thames Water in the earlier version, which frankly is an oversight. Obviously, the effects of sewage overspills and so on can be really quite impactful on our local waterways. And I'm pleased to see that now there is explicit mention of working with Thames Water and other stakeholders to improve the ecological conditions of our waterways through things like upgrading sewage treatment plants and so on.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? And Dominic Lamb's in the room as well, so I'm sure you'll be called upon later in the meeting. Too much distraction. Oh yes, of course. Sorry. Thank you very much. Candida's just reminded me we have further input from the Joint Audit and Governance Committee. They met on Friday, the 16th of September. Actually, I have it right in front of me, so I don't need to. Thank you very much. So they met and discussed the Treasury Outturn report for 24-25. And was that their own that they noted? They noted our resolutions. There wasn't any specific feedback at all. Nothing's been provided. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. So, without further ado, sorry, Councillor Coleman.
So although I didn't present at the audit committee, I was there, and they were satisfied with that report, and actually thanked officers for the work they'd done. Can I also raise from another meeting I was at?
Yes.
So I don't think Councillor Foxhall's online.
No, I haven't seen that.
No, okay. So I did attend the Vale scrutiny on the 29th of September, where they took the financial outturn report, which is a report that goes to them that basically looks back at the previous year and explains where we were either over or underspent, talks about the investments, but it is a report that doesn't then come to this cabinet. So if you're happy, overall they were very happy with the report, and particularly if I can say to the officers, the format of because it's a new style. It was very readable, and they were able to glean all the information that they required from it. There were some recommendations which on behalf of Cabinet I agreed that I would raise with colleagues because it's not all my area. They are in the minutes, but I'll just give a quick resume of what they were. So overall, the committee was very pleased to see that the community infrastructure levy in SIL goes towards healthcare in Oxfordshire. This is part of our spend strategy for SIL, so very pleased for that, and would like us to continue. I don't believe we have at the moment any intention review that and not spend it. So that's a positive. There was concern over some of the underspends, and I did explain that. I mean, all those were explained away. Quite a lot of it was things like gap posts that we hadn't spent on salaries, for example. But we will be going into both an officer and member challenge of the budget. Actually, the officer's already doing it, and the members will be doing so in later on in autumn, where we will look at anywhere there was an underspend and determine that we've got the right balance for the budget for 26-27. Rural England Prosperity Fund grants, there was overall a lack of one take up, but also then spend against the REPF. And the scrutiny committee asked why that was. To some degree, it was because there were some very tight deadlines that were set by the government, and the money had to be spent by the end. By the end of March. The committee asked that we engage with government and say, can we ask for more time? That has been done previously, and of course, I'm assuming we'll carry on doing the same thing because it's it's funding that can be used by organisations. So we need to optimise the amount of time, but equally, the government, will need to know that they get the money spent in the year. I should say that, and I think Councillor Paulson, correct me if I'm wrong here, but any unspent money does not roll forward to increase the fund for the following year, but it gets offset against our allowance or our allocation. They also mentioned specifically national infrastructure, and that there were some costs that we had received during the year and presumably will do so. I'm thinking maybe things like CESRO, where we might need to employ or engage with some legal advice, or there'll be legal fees, etc. And I assured scrutiny that we would, as best we can, where we know these things, we would consider those and ensure that we had to include those in the budget. And then the final point, as I've already mentioned, was they thought the report was very clear and would like us to continue to present the information in that format. I raised it because I said I would. I don't think we need to, unless anyone wants to comment on those now, but it's in the minutes, and therefore we can take those things forward. I think now it's on record.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we can go on to the substantive part of the agenda. So item number 8, presented by Councillor Coleman, Treasury Management Outturn Report 24-25. It seems weird not to go to Councillor Crawford, but she is. Councillor Coleman.
I'm very happy for it. I think you'll hear something from him later on. So, so thank you very much, Chair. The Treasury Management Outturn for 24-25 report. This report, which has already been considered by Joint Audit and Governance Committee, we heard earlier on, fulfils legislative requirements to ensure adequate monitoring and reporting of the Council's Treasury management activity. This report is a backward-looking outturn report, which covers the previous financial year up to 31st of March 2025. The Joint Audit and Governance Committee noted the report's contents and were satisfied that Treasury activities in the period 24-25 were carried out in accordance with the Treasury management strategy and policy. Treasury performance is summarised in the table on page 12 of the report, and it shows that against a budget of 6.2 million, the Council earned 8.2 million. This significant overachievement of income, which is detailed in Appendix D, was primarily the result of an interest rate staying at higher levels than we were predicted, and when the Treasury income predictions were made at the beginning of the year. Treasury performance was very close to benchmarks. Internally managed investment returns were marginally above the benchmark of the 3-month Sterling Overnight Index Average benchmark, also known as SONIA, and the performance of the Council's CCLA investments was marginally below the benchmark. And so I would like Cabinet please to, as per the recommendations, note the Treasury Management Outturn Report. that the Cabinet is satisfied that Treasury activities are carried out in accordance with Treasury management strategy and policy as recommended by the Audit Committee, and that we recommend to Council to approve the Treasury Management Outturn Report for 24-25 and approve the actual 24-25 prudential indicators within the report, which is Annex D, Appendix D, sorry.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coleman. Does anybody have any questions on confidence? Councillor Crawford, careful.
I guess all I would say is that it's in the report, but it's interesting, isn't it? We do not borrow anything. This council, no borrowing, and that's in stark contrast to a lot of councils across the country. So, an indication how well Councillor Coleman's been running.
Yes,
that's not in charge. He's around.
I think Councillor Crawford is so careful. You never have time for it. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. There's a serious point. I mean, a lot of councils are, burdened by borrowing, and this council is not.
And whilst the problem of borrowing is it comes back as a double whammy, that you not only have to obviously pay back the money that you borrowed, but then you also pay an overhead for doing so out of the revenue. So even though you might be borrowing for capital programs, it does have an effect on the revenue budget, which, as we'll be finding out later on in the year, we don't have that much money lying around to cover those sort of burdens. So yeah, so perhaps I propose that Cabinet would accept those recommendations, but also I would like to say thank you very much to the officers for providing those reports. There's a lot of work goes into them, and obviously the daily work of monitoring investments and such like as well throughout the year. So if I could just record my thanks to the team for doing that.
Thank you. Yes. Some of these finance reports are so quickly dealt with, but that doesn't reflect the amount of work that goes into preparing them. So yes, I echo your thanks. And I would ask, are we happy to note the Treasury Management Outturn and approve the Outturn report and the rest of the recommendations are set out on that page?
Yes.
Yes. So we need a proposer and a seconder, or
I'll propose that.
Propose, seconder,
Second.
Councillor Smith, everybody, approve, agreed. Thank you very much. Now, I believe we are on to item number 9, which is the Wantage Leisure Centre and Whitehorse Leisure Tennis Centre Daily Exchange 3B Decarbonisation Project Report, and that is being presented today by Councillor Crawford.
I think it's got a mouthful, isn't it?
It is.
So I'm pleased to bring forward this report, which outlines the final steps needed to complete our decarbonisation projects at Wantage Leisure Centre and at the Whitehorse Leisure and Tennis Centre. These projects are a cornerstone of our commitment to reducing carbon emissions across the council assets and improvement of long-term sustainability of our leisure centres. At Wantage Leisure Centre, the team have already completed around 80% of the works. That's the Gascon and I were there not long ago to look at the impressive progress they've made. However, as is often the case with retrofitting older buildings, that leisure centre dates back to the 1970s, and the team have encountered several unforeseen issues. These include additional areas of water-damaged roofing. This was substantial, and until you took the felt up, they didn't realise how awful it was underneath the felt. Outdated electrical wiring, the need for a new air handling unit, and fire stopping compliance upgrades. These were just some of the additional bits of work that were required. They weren't in the original scope, but are essential, ensuring the building meets modern standards and remains operational for years to come. To address the funding shortfall, we're proposing a supplementary budget of 440,000, which will be drawn from Section 106 contributions secured in Wantage and the surrounding areas. These funds were previously ring-fenced for a leisure centre project and are being repurposed in line with the leisure needs strategy endorsed last December. A further adjustment is the use of £866 and £375 from SIL, which was currently allocated to the White Horse Leisure Centre and to be proposed to be reallocated to the Wantage Leisure Centre. Annex 3 of the report provides a clear breakdown of how the budget was and will be funded. So in summary, 1.376 comes from the Salix grant, just over 902,000 comes from Section 106 agreements, 1.3 million comes from SIL contributions, and importantly, Oxfordshire County Council are funding in total 1.393 million under the joint user agreement we have. The total revised budget stands at just over 5 million, 5,012,000, which includes a 20% contingency to cover any future unforeseen works. OCC, as I mentioned, is joint tenant and is liable for 50% of the costs related to the variations, and officers have been working with them to secure their share. So why does this matter? Well, if we don't approve the funding, we risk halting the project and potentially having to repay the Salix grant. On the other hand, completing the project excuse me, will reduce our carbon emissions at Wantage by up to 65% and deliver annual energy savings of over £46,000 and extend the life of both the buildings and reduce future maintenance. So in summary, this is a complex but vital project. It is about more than just meeting a grant condition. It's about future-proofing our leisure centres, reducing our carbon footprint and delivering better facilities for our communities. And I commend the officers for their diligent work in managing these challenges. I know for a fact that they were up to the midnight hour going through the report, which is highly complex, to be honest. And I recommend Cabinet supports the recommendations to ensure completion of both projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford.
Thanks for taking questions.
Are there any questions or clarifications we need? Yes, Colin?
Well, it's not really a question, but just to support the project, as you mentioned, we made a visit to the project, and actually we visited both Wantage and White Horse Leisure and Tennis Centre, and I thought I knew a lot about this type of stuff, and even I was very impressed at the extent. It's not just sticking some solar panels. It's not the same as putting them on your house. It's much more complicated than that, and been very impressed about how the projects have been managed, and I'm really excited to see going forward the reduction in our carbon emissions, the energy savings. So I think it's a no-brainer, and I'm really glad that we've gone through this, and and there were obviously circumstances with the roofing and stuff that you talked about, but overall our leisure centres will be a lot better off for this. And so just as the cabinet member for climate action, just to support this, really.
Councillor Pickles?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there was never really any doubt that it could be done at the White Horse Leisure Centre because it's a relatively modern building. But I think the fact that, okay, we had to approve the extra budget, but it's just proved it can be done with an older building. And just the building's older, it's not an absolute deal breaker for retrofitting things like solar and air source. So I think we should commend our officers and everyone for getting the project going in the first place, really.
On that note, it's worth mentioning perhaps that some of the additional works that have been carried out would have been required even if we'd not gone down the decarbonisation route. So when they took the felt off some of the roof sections and found basically completely sodden pieces of material underneath, they also discovered that some of the original construction wasn't done according to best standards anyway. So there were timbers that hadn't been covered with waterproofing material that were completely rotten significantly. So all of that would have been required at some point had we not had the Salix grant. So we're spending money that we haven't had to have anyway, regardless of any energy savings.
Thank you. Yes.
So I'm not sure. This is probably a question that I would be having to ask myself, but given your previously had a finance portfolio, So back in November, we allocated just over £1 million additional funding, which was through Section 106, and we received half of that back through OCC repayment, and there will be work ongoing to. I think the phrase was that once we receive the money back, it would be ring fenced for its original purpose.
Yes.
So, i.e., if it said that it was for sports facilities within a certain radius of the development, then that would then have to be, we would consider it for future.
And ring fenced in that.
Ring fence for that, albeit it would not be Section 106 funds, it would be capital receipts. It's a technicality, but capital receipts gives us a bit more flexibility and I guess significantly has no expiry date, which Section 106 does. I remind colleagues that if you get to the end of your expiry date of Section 106, you've not spent it, you are then bound to go back to the developer to offer that money back to them, which clearly is not a good use of about funds. So for this one, then the source of funding from the Vale is effectively the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is good. But then it's a mix of between SIL and Section 106. So we're going through the same process again with the Section 106 of £440,000, which colleagues will see in the report on page 11. It breaks down where those Section 106 contributions have come from. And significantly, some of those have a spend before date. So I'm not sure this is a question for you, Councillor Fawcett, but maybe officers can. Sorry, Crawford. But maybe officers can help out. Is there any means of us altering the ratio of or how we get that expenditure, i.e., why are we spending 440 from Section 106 as opposed to taking that out of SIL? Because the 886,000 is from an underspend on the White Horse Leisure Centre. I believe there probably was more of an underspend than that. From a finance member's perspective, I would much rather us have SIL funding and capital receipts than have Section 106 because it does provide greater flexibility and is not timed, as I've already said. But can I just ask officers if they're able to comment on have we got the right ratio of SIL to Section 106 funding here, given that as ward members will probably say, well, can we not retain the Section 106 for something within our area?
Thank you.
Before officers answer that, can I just maybe make a couple of clarifications? The 440,000 that you mentioned, we're expecting OCC to refund 50% of that.
That's right.
Because it's not yet in their budget, a bit like last year, we're having to effectively forward fund their 50% share. But I understand officers have had relevant discussions with OCC. Obviously, it's simply a question of it's not yet in.
Yes, so similar to the money in November, we, in terms of how much money we're going to be spending, 220,000 on Section 106, but then the capital receipt of 220,000 coming back to us.
And I guess the other thing is, yes, there is a gap between the SIL amount that this paper is calling for of 860,000, I think, versus how much the underspend was on SIL in White Horse Leisure Centre. Were the council to decide to use more of that in SIL, it's not necessarily the case that effectively the savings, we can call it that, advantage needs to be taken from Section 106. It could be taken from ring-fence capital, couldn't it?
Yeah, it could, and I guess that's my question. Can I just understand the philosophy of how we came to this apportionment?
Shall we go to Simon?
Thank you. So in terms of this report, excuse me, this report is consistent with the previous report and the methodology that was applied there. So in other words, we use available Section 106 contributions. I'll come back to some of those in a minute, and then to front fund, and then get the money back from the the county, and then the money we get back from the county is ring fenced for its original purpose. So that principle was effectively put into the report that was considered in November, and we followed that logic in this report. Now, in terms of the Section 106 contributions, some of those that I think are being used are time limited. And I think, you know, there are limited options potentially to use those receipts for other purposes at this stage. I would also comment that I think at the point at which budgets were previously set, we were at the limit of using the SIL that we had available at that time. So that, I think, is how we got to here. I think looking ahead, ironically, I think actually how capital programme items are funded is ultimately a decision for the head of finance, i.e. me, as part of financial year end. So I think the critical thing that we are doing here is approving the additional expenditure, and we are demonstrating how we can fund it. I think the opportunity exists to revisit that in light of, you know, potential review of the 106 pots we are using, available SIL money, any underspend available from White Horse. We could consider that in the mix to potentially try and maximise. You know, if there are opportunities to use other funds, then we can take them. I would, however, come back to, I think, Councillor Coleman's point, is that actually, if Vale's financial position is challenging, and it makes sense for Vale to have more flexibility on what it can on its resources available to spend on capital, which would take you down the road of maximising the SIL money available to you.
Thank you. Andrew, did you want to come in?
Good morning, Cabinet. Just to support what Simon mentioned about the flexibility of utilising SIL and the ring fencing as Section 106 will be, you know, earmarked capital receipts. So so support what Simon fed back to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Simon. Does that clarify matters sufficiently? Are you happy that we go ahead? I was going to ask, that you mentioned the contingency. Presumably, if that's not spent, that goes back into the pot, which is good.
Do you mean the underspend of the SIL?
No, you mentioned a contingency.
Okay, there's still works to be done.
Yeah,
I'm sure. To obviously, we don't know for sure exactly how much money is going to be spent. So there might be money we might have over budgeted. Yes.
That'd be good. If there are no further questions, and I just also wanted to just bring to the attention that Councillor Clegg and Councillor James spoke on this, and I hope that they can see that we're taking this matter very seriously. And as Councillor Pickhill said, it's not just an older building is not sort of written off as a non-retrofit option. So I think that's a good thing to see, and we will continue to explore the options as much as possible. So if I can ask, are we ready to consider the recommendations?
I propose them.
Yes, of course, please do. Do we need to read through or just have them as set out on the cover page of the report? So if Councillor Crawford is going to propose, you will second if that's appropriate. And is everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Thank you. I set out.
Yeah.
So on to, so it's all back and forth today. So on to item number 10, which is the adoption of the North Wessex Downs National Landscape Management Plan 25 to 30, and that will be introduced by Councillor Gascoigne, and Dominic Lamb is in the room. Should we have any further questions that Councillor Gascoigne might think about? Councillor Gascoigne.
Thank you. This report asks Cabinet to adopt the North Wessex Downs National Landscape Management Plan 25-2030. The new management plan builds on the existing management plan that the council adopted in 2019. The existing plan is well respected by officers, but and is used to help inform decisions made by the council. However, the existing plan is now becoming outdated and needs review. Council has been involved in the creation of the new plan throughout, with input at all 4 stages of production. First, there was an initial consultation with officers in November, December last year, which set out the timetable for the review of the management plan and asked for our high-level view of the existing management plan and key areas for revision or addition. The council then contributed to a review of the existing management plan in February 25, so February this year. Officers were involved in the drafting of Chapter 5, Biodiversity and Nature Recovery. Finally, the council submitted a formal response to the public consultation on the draft plan back in April. Final adoption draft, which you have before you, has responded positively to issues raised during public consultation and has been amended to take on board many of the comments that were submitted by the council. In summary, the main changes in the new management plan are reference to the strengthened duty on relevant authorities under Section 85 of the Countryside and Rights of Way Act 2000, as amended by the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2024, highlighting the increased importance of protected landscape management plans. A new set of overarching principles to guide use of the management plan by everyone involved in the North Wessex Downs National Landscape. Substantive new section added on climate change, Chapter 7, Climate and Natural Resources, on which stronger emphasis on nature recovery with reference to government's environmental improvement plan and county level local nature recovery strategies, something which we'll talk about later in the agenda, and reference to the DEFRA protected landscapes targets outcomes framework, including targets apportioned to the North Wessex Downs National Landscape. More attention paid to the importance of healthy soils and other opportunities for regenerative farming and land management. A shift in emphasis from responsible tourism towards improving and widening access more generally for health and well-being. So therefore, we're asking members to support the adoption of the new management plan.
Thank you, Councillor Gascoigne. And yeah, I think I just start quite coincidentally. This morning I looked at my computer and Google photos came up with memories of North Wessex Downs. So I've got lots of lovely photos this morning that made me think of this paper. And as I was portfolio holder for this and this report before you took it on, I was very interested in this piece. And I know that our officers have been integral in getting this together. So I'd like to thank them, Dom in particular. I believe he's had a lot to do with this and partnership as it goes forward. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this? It's a very positive report. Councillor Coleman.
So first, an observation. So I'm good at statement being obvious. It's a mandatory requirement for us to have one of these in place. So if we don't take this, then we end up having to write, presumably we have to write our own. And this is a good model. So therefore, why would we not take this? I think so. That's my starting point. If I can then just go on to the, unsurprisingly, the financial implications. It actually looks quite low at 4,000 for 23-24 and 5,000 for 25-26. I'm presuming that this increments, within inflation costs or such like. So it's something that we need to presumably put into the budget for the following years. And can I just ask, how is that? Is it calculated? Is it interest? Is it interest that inflation that brings it? Sorry, I don't know. You should address that too.
Yes.
Thanks, Tom.
So the amount that the councils pay is set by the council partners in the North Wessex Downs, and that's determined each year in November. So we don't yet know the figure for next year, but there's an equation related to the grant from DEFRA,
Yep.
and that funds a certain amount, and the local authorities but the partners have to fund the rest. So it's partially dependent on the amount of the grant from DEFRA and inflation, and obviously the costs that the team incurs. So it's not a straightforward answer, I'm afraid.
But okay, so then can I ask a supplementary, which
Yes.
is that I'm therefore assuming it's unlikely we're going to end up with a suddenly, now need to pay out £500,000, and it's going to stay within this order of magnitude. Yeah.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I was going to say, Don, would you like to come and sit at the tables? Because you're going to be here for a while. So, any further questions? Comments? It's a wonderful paper, and it's reflective. I mean, we're very lucky to have be able to be living in such a lovely landscape, a national landscape. Previously it was an area of outstanding natural beauty, but not anymore. It's a national landscape and a very important one. And I'm glad to see that this report has come together. And thank you again to officers. So there's only a single recommendation there, and I would like to suggest that we adopt the plan today. Would you like to propose?
I'll propose, yeah.
Anyone seconding?
Second.
Councillor Fawcett, and we're all in agreement.
Agreed.
Agree. So straight on to another great bit of partnership working. The approval for publication of the Oxfordshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy, again presented by Councillor Gascoigne.
Thank you. So not, kind of on a related topic, this report asks members to approve the publication of the Oxfordshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy. The production of the Local Nature Recovery Strategy is a requirement of the Environment Act. The County Council is a responsible body for producing the Local Nature Recovery Strategy, and with Vale, the other districts, the City Council and Natural England as supporting authorities. This has been developed over a 3-year period and has involved a significant amount of consultation and input from a wide variety of specialist stakeholders. That includes, as Councillor Craig mentioned, SEAC were involved also in this. And other members outside of SEAC also had the opportunity, as well as our officers here, over that 2-year period. The mapping and priorities were initially developed using a specialist software application called Systematic Conservation Planning. This was then refined by input from many local experts. There was also a lot of comprehensive public engagement with workshops and presentations, including a presentation to SEAC. Following all of that, there was a formal public consultation exercise, which generated over 2,100 responses, which have been reviewed and used to improve the final version, which you can see before you today. The strategy, it consists of 3 documents and an online map. So the documents are the description of the strategy area, which provides a general introduction and how it's developed, goes on to describe the state of the existing habitats and species populations found in the county, identifies the pressures that are impacting them, and therefore identifying the priorities for action. Second document, the statement of biodiversity priorities, identifying the habitats that are the priority within the county, and then the measures that need to be taken to create, enhance or restore these habitats. Next document would be the species priority lists, identifies a list of 55 species or groups of species that are the priority for conservation in our county. These are species that need specific measures that are not captured in the habitat actions identified in the statement of the biodiversity priorities, which I previously mentioned. And then finally, the map, which I think is, if any of you have had time to look at it, you see is quite, I was quite impressed with it really, but it's very interactive. You can zoom in, add filters and things like that, and it identifies where those habitat measures should be delivered. And and includes measures that can be delivered in the wider countryside in recognition of the need to do more for wildlife everywhere. So in summary, the production of the local nature recovery strategy has been a genuine collaboration between the County Council and many stakeholders and individuals who have had substantive input into shaping the final output. And therefore, I recommend that members agree to the publication of the strategy as set out in this report.
Thank you. Yes, fine. Again, this is I shouldn't say it's a lovely paper, but it's so exciting that all of the councils across the county have got together to produce this, and to in a way celebrate what we have, what wildlife and nature we have and are lucky enough to have, and what we can do to enhance that. I was just saying to Dom, I was at one of my favourite places in the Vale, and I was getting it was a little snapshot of their wildlife that they recorded over the week, and it included badgers, and little mice and voles and things like that. But I was thinking about polecats, which I didn't even know that we had. So that was really exciting. And I'm sure there are so many different hotspots and areas that we need to protect and enhance. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Pickens.
I just want to make a comment. I think it doesn't happen very often that we approve a strategy that is actually a really good read. You feel like recommending it and going back to it, and so
yes, no, I do understand. So,
I'm glad we played part in it as well.
Yes. Any further?
So yeah, again, I was really impressed with the document. Like you say, it is a good read. I was trying to think of a phrase, but I can't think of a better one than yours. But no, it's really useful, and the whole process of how it came about is really positive as well. Yeah. So it's kind of when all the partnerships and sort of, we've got so many experts living in the area and working in the area who have input into it. So you kind of really trust that it's a really good quality document in terms of content, as well as it being easy to sort of accessible to people to read and use. And I was just going to mention that one of the things I was particularly interested in terms of planning development and about how we could use it. So I did ask Suzanne perhaps for a bit more information about what weighting it has in planning terms, and because it's like an evidence base that we can use, it has material planning weight. And I just think that that's also a really positive thing, because it will help us guide planning decisions to make sure that we're protecting what's already there, and taking opportunities to enhance it where we can, having that sort of wider structure to kind of feed into and link to. I think that's going to be quite useful for planning decision making as well.
Yeah, definitely. Don, would you like to add anything?
No, thank you for your support.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for all the work that I know that you put into producing this. One of the key players, so thank you. So no further comments or questions?
No, just to echo your comments, Councillor, about Dom's work on this. I know that he it's a topic that he cares about passionately, so we're very lucky to have an officer who is providing our input on behalf of the Vale, who really cares about it. So thank you.
Thank you. So if we could, I think there's only one recommendation again. So Councillor Gascoigne, would you like to propose?
Yes, please. Yeah, I'll propose.
Seconder. Okay. Thank you very much. And we all agree to the recommendation.
Agreed.
Very much. So item number 12, again introduced by Councillor Gascoigne, operational net zero annual progress report.
Thank you. Okay, so this paper reports on carbon emissions from the council's own operations and is an update from last year's annual report. It covers actual emissions in the financial year to March 2025 and also includes projections to 2030 and beyond. Paper aims to take a realistic view of the council's likely progress moving forwards, taking into account current plans and the context in which the council is operating. Teams across the council, including property, waste and technical services, have contributed to the report by providing details of their latest plans for our stock and council fleet. The report sets out 5 scenarios which are cumulative, each one building on the ones before. It presents a mixed picture for the future. On the positive side, the council is making substantial progress in decarbonising its leisure centres, we've heard about already today, with major projects in Farringdon, Abingdon and Wantage due for completion shortly. The council has successfully won funding from government's public sector decarbonisation scheme for this work. Across the council, teams are taking action to lease and buy electric vehicles for example, food waste collection, as well as use by the grounds maintenance and public convenience supervisors. However, local government reorganisation has presented us with some challenges. Major investments are unlikely before 2028, and some decisions will now be unfortunately postponed to be made by a future authority. Yeah, just on a personal note, it is obviously disappointing, and it's great that we're making progress in certain areas, and it's a shame that we can't make as much progress as we would like. And I know both of our public speakers, Councillor James and Councillor Clegg, feel the same in that regard. But we are doing what we can. The council's proposed new waste depot will be located in Great Hazley. Although the site provides the facilities required by the council, its location will unfortunately result in an increase in the mileage driven by waste collection vehicles. It's set out in the report. Finally, the council's trial of an electric 26-ton waste vehicle gave no clear results due to technical problems with the vehicle provided, and as such we currently have no evidence that large electric vehicles have the range needed to cope with our rural waste collection rounds. And just to mention what Councillor Clegg was saying earlier, I think this is sort of common across rural districts. This is a challenge that we are facing, but that all rural districts face, just because of the route. It's not just the route that's large, but also the back and forth between the depots, and it is a challenge, and hopefully one that a future authority will be able to tackle as technology increases or improves. So just to say, the actual data presented in the report shows an increase in the council's emissions in the year to March 2025, and this is due to an increase in the number of households in the district and the number of garden waste customers, which have affected the waste collection mileage. Winter 2024 was also cooler than the previous year, which affected fuel use. So yeah, we're asked to note the progress. So any questions, please?
Thank you. I mean, I know you're really passionate about this subject, and I understand your comments coming from a personal point of view. Obviously, we are all trying to do what we can. And in that vein, I was going to ask, you mentioned about the electric trial. And that was inconclusive. Is there going to be any further trial of an electric vehicle, or that one for an officer?
Yeah, it's one for an officer, but yeah, it's just for my comment. Yeah, there's something I would like to see, but it is good to note that we're obviously doing it with the vehicles that we can. So the maintenance vehicles, but also the food waste truck, which is a smaller one that can manage that. And we had some really positive feedback from BIFA on that recently. But yeah, officers to answer the
other question. I may as well wrap it up.
Yes,
comes from Councillor Clegg's comments about, I can't remember exactly what the
hydro treated vegetable oils.
Yeah,
HVO.
Whether that has been considered.
I can also comment on that. It is something that we've talked about, and I think it's we could give it some more consideration, but I think at a high level that it's not really the solution we would want. I think it still has significant carbon emissions, and talking about the source, and on one hand we might be reducing our carbon emissions, but on the other we might be deforesting important habitats. So it's a tricky one, but one that we could look at more detail.
officers want to come in on that, or do you, Councillor Fawcett and Crawford, do you want to come in on?
I come in now, then the officers will maybe
Yeah,
come up something
yeah,
to do
yeah.
that. I guess my thoughts are twofold. One, trouble with HVO, it's nearly all imported. And there are some, I believe, at least 2 government inquiries going on at the moment about HVO, including dumping. What I was saying, that would be a concern. There's no mention in here of hydrogen. I don't think. Maybe I've missed it as an alternative fuel. I just wondered if there's been any further thoughts about that as the market has no doubt changed over time.
Did you want to come in on that?
Yeah. So back in April 24, we had the waste vehicle purchase strategy paper came to Cabinet, which is actually the first time that we've ever had a strategy set out. And in that it does talk about the various fuels, including hydrogen. And in the purchase of Great Hazley, part of the factor that we were looking for is to give us the flexibility of choosing which fuel combination that we require. The problem with hydrogen, unsurprisingly, it's very volatile. There are quite strong restrictions on where you can store the fuel or how you store the fuel, and then the proximity of parked vehicles and such like. So it's not something that's been discounted, and it is definitely something to look at, but there are difficulties with it. And whilst I've got the floor then too, I think key, and to some degree, this is for Councillor James, for us to consider all the things that we can to reduce the carbon footprint. That strategy does include the requirement to do so, but it also makes sure, if I do it in order, that the ability to meet the operational need has got to be the first, because that's a statutory requirement. Financial ability to pay for whatever that solution is the second one, which unsurprisingly you would expect me to say, as finance. So as with all these things, there's a very fine balance, but there is some good news over the electric vehicle for the food waste, where we believe actually this will save us, not only in terms of carbon footprint, in terms of cost, because it's a newer vehicle, it compresses the food waste down, so we don't have to do those shuttle runs that you were talking about, which is actually probably the most significant bit of waste collection. And that's probably a really good segue into, okay, so we know the 10-ton, might be a little bit less than 10 ton, but the food waste vehicle electric is working reasonably well. Maybe Paul Field can have a comment, can reply on the future.
Yeah, I was going to get Councillor Fawcett's comments, unless they were completely unrelated.
No, they're linked. Partly similar to Councillor Crawford's point. And this is more of an overall comment. We've made really good progress, and we wouldn't have made that progress had we not set out very ambitious targets a few years ago. We should be very proud to have made those achievements. But we now know a lot more about some of the challenges in some of these areas, particularly in terms of the waste fleet. And as Councillor Gascoigne said, we have the challenge of local government reorganisation coming up, which will steadily limit some of the decisions we're able to make. I think what we do need to do in that context is, firstly, and this is where the potential sale of hydrogen powered vehicles comes in, is and in line with the strategy we agreed, we need to keep on top of the options. We shouldn't stop working on what those options might be for the future, because whatever system of unitaries we end up with, we want the new unitaries to be able to pick up on that work as quickly as possible. And given particularly, I completely agree with the comments that were made earlier by councillors about we are still in an urgent climate crisis. Sometimes with everything else going on, that's not in the news as much, but it's still the case. So we need to do everything we can to avoid any significant delay. So it's about, what are things we can do? We should keep doing them. And part of that is about being open to alternatives. Part of it, I think we should also look at is what are the other ways in which we can offset our carbon emissions. If it's likely that for a few years yet we're not going to have the technology or the usable technology to completely decarbonise the waste fleet, what are other potential options for offsetting some of our carbon emissions as an alternative approach? And that's something that we have looked at a little bit in the past, but maybe an area where we need to put a bit more and thought in. Again, it may not be this council in its current form that delivers those in 3 years' time or whatever, but we should be doing the work so that we're ready for it.
Keeping the options open and working on them.
Can I just come back briefly on the offsetting? This is a topic that we have discussed, and that CF has been part of the discussions as well. The officers have asked us extensively what our principles would be for offsetting, but it is unfortunately another one of those things that we're a little bit hampered by local government reorganisation because we're not being able to invest in things and things like that. But so we're just, we're making recommendations for a future council.
Yeah, and I absolutely understand that. I think the thing for me is we shouldn't be stopping, if you like, the preparation work on some of those options, which we can do, even if a council decision can't be made for a couple of years because of LGR. What we don't want to do is just stop and then mean that everything else would happen 2 years later than it would otherwise happen.
Thank you. Now, Paul, would you like to come back in or Don?
I think councillors have sort of neatly answered many of their own questions in this.
Very good,
honestly. I think I would just summarise by saying we are keeping all options very much under review. So we're constantly looking at HBO, looking at verification issues related to that. We know, for example, that Cherwell District Council recently took a decision to switch to HBO. So we're going to review that with them. We're keeping all of these things under review, including hydrogen, including the potential for new EV trials, although that may become more challenging until we've actually moved to our new waste depot where we'll have charging facilities. So I think all of that's very much being kept under review, and there's a lot of work going on. The waste team and we work very closely together, keep these things sort of to make sure we're on top of the current evidence and know what's going on. And as Councillor Fawcett said, and Councillor Gascoigne, offsetting is something we are keeping under review. We're doing a lot of active work on to try and stimulate markets that might actually allow us to invest in things which benefit other areas of our work, like nature recovery. If we can invest in something which sequesters carbon, that may help us to deliver our nature recovery strategy. So we're not stopping, we're carrying on, but it may limit our ability to make investment decisions.
Thank you. I can see Heather has got her hand up. Hello, Heather.
Hi there. So just to comment on the specific question about would there be another trial? So the trial was government funded by Innovate UK, and obviously then it would depend whether there were any further similar trials coming forward for us to participate in. We were actually approached by contacts in Innovate UK, so we have a good relationship. So hopefully if there was anything similar, there would be a chance for us to engage. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Does anybody have any further questions or comments?
So just to add, I think the area of household waste collection is something that, so with the portfolios that I cover, obviously environmental services, which covers waste anyway, but then climate action, and actually probably many of you know the figures, but the waste collection accounts for a large proportion of our carbon emissions. It's about half. And so this is something that's very much on my radar, and obviously Dom outlined that it's also on his. So really looking for any opportunities we do have. Just noting that we do have challenges being Royal District and with local government reorganisation. But yeah, as outlined by everybody else, we'll keep reviewing. Yeah.
Clear message. We're being asked to note this report, note the progress on this report. Is that correct? Yeah. So, do we need to propose noting, or just we all agree to note? Do we need to
I'm happy if you just all agree to.
Yeah, do we all agree?
Yeah, agree.
Very much. So on to item 13, is that correct?
Yeah.
So progress towards net zero in favour of White Horse, and that's the more general one.
Correct, yes. So the previous report, we were looking at what we're doing within our own operations that should be very much within our control. This paper looks at the emissions of the district as a whole, most of which we don't have any control over. Obviously, people make their own choices and businesses do their own things, but it is important that we are looking at the carbon emissions of this and something that we want to improve. So the paper sets out the progress that has been made towards meeting Vale of Whitehorse's target to be net zero by 2045. The report is for information only, and it presents the latest data on emissions as published by the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero in July 2025. The data presented is from the 2023 calendar year. It sounds like a while ago, but this is how DESNZ operates. So we have 822.7 tonnes of carbon dioxide greenhouse emissions were emitted in Vale of Whitehorse in 2023, which was 3.6% lower than in 2022. So less than the UK average, which was, so we're 5.6 per person, whereas the average was 8.7 per person. The biggest proportion of emissions came from the transport sector, which matches the UK-wide picture. It's something which Councillor James mentioned in her presentation to us at the start of the meeting. These emissions are from freight and passenger transport, with road vehicles being the largest source of emissions. There's been an annual average reduction of 3.3% from 2019 to 2023. The rate of decarbonisation is accelerating slightly, but is still lagging behind where it needs to be to reach net zero targets. As I mentioned at the start, unlike the council's operational emissions, there's a limit on what the council can do to reduce district-wide emissions, as a large proportion are completely outside of control. However, the council does have an influence, and over the last few years, we've undertaken a number of activities to support reduction in district-wide emissions. And I just wanted to thank Councillor James for some of her suggestions at the start of the meeting as well, and it's something for us to think about. And I'm sure some of it is covered in our nature and climate action plan, but yeah, will certainly be on my mind as well. So some of the activities: undertaking a programme of work to reduce the council's operational greenhouse gas emissions, the major decarbonisation projects, a lot of which we've talked about already today. We've supported the County Council with delivery of the Home Upgrade Grant Funding Scheme, which installed retrofitting measures to 240 homes in Oxfordshire. Installing 62 public electric vehicle charging bays in council car parks to provide infrastructure needed for residents and businesses to transition to EVs. And providing funding to local organisations for energy efficiency initiatives and decarbonisation measures. So that's our Climate Action Fund, which I think many of you will have heard about just in the past couple of weeks, where we've awarded 100,000 in grants to many local organisations. And it's great to hear of the different things that they're doing. There are also a number of programmes we are working on which will support emission reductions in the future. Participating in the Oxfordshire Local Area Energy Planning Programme to establish the pathway for how we get from our current energy system to the energy system we need for a net zero future. So local area energy planning is something I've talked about a lot even before I was in this role, and I'm really glad that we're taking part in the Oxfordshire one. So that is going through its stages at the moment, and there'll be opportunities for input into that, but basically looks at how our energy system works, so what the requirements are, but also where we would need renewable energy instalments to help us get towards net zero. And I think personally it's really important to have a plan for that, so that we know where we should be supporting things and installing things to meet the need that we will have in the future. Much better to do that with a plan. Exploring options for introducing stronger net zero requirements for buildings through the planning process, and exploring the potential for development of low carbon heat networks in DICOP. So the council will continue to proactively support opportunities to accelerate the rate of decarbonisation in the district, which we will mainly do by working with partnership organisations as set out in the Nature and Climate Action Plan. And we will continue to annually report and monitor district-wide emissions through the data that's released by the government.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that? It's a tricky one because it's much more broad than our own operational and council comment.
And I think we're making good progress. And I mean, to some degree, we were starting from a position where we hadn't really done a huge amount of benchmarking when this target was set. And that there's a real risk when you do that. If you don't know where you're starting from, you can create something that's not achievable. And then, of course, there are some things that are just completely out of our hands. And so things like noting that vehicles create more carbon than anywhere else. When the government then changes, when we will take internal combustion engines out of the programme, will inevitably have a knock-on effect. And so we need to be realistic. And I'm not for a minute saying that we should change our target. However, we do need to be aware of some of the things that are just impossible to resolve without having national legislation change. And then this is, thank you to Councillor James, where we should be then looking and saying, okay, well, we might not be able to solve this completely, but are we doing the maximum we possibly can? And I think we are. I think we're at least considering it. But I think the likelihood, even just nationally, well, for us, but I would say also nationally, of meeting some of these targets is going to be really, really tricky without having probably not just national changes. A number of countries now that are pulling out of the Paris Agreement, for example, that without that impetus, then we're going to struggle. But struggling is the right thing to do because we should be doing the max. But I guess I'm just putting a bit of a word of caution that we can set targets and we really want to achieve them, but sometimes they're just not possible for things that are out of our control.
Yeah, and if I can just come back on that. So the setting of the targets. I was part of that. I was on the climate emergency advisory committee. Yeah, no, I'm happy to defend it. That was back when we started the committee up, when we took control of the administration in 2019. And that was one of our first tasks, was then chaired by Councillor Grant, who used to be Councillor Ruther. And I felt strongly at the time, you're right, it's extremely hard to set targets when you don't know. We were admittedly just picking it out of the air, but I did feel strongly that it was better to have a target than no target at all. And particularly with the district-wide emissions, we set them for 2045. And part of that, in my mind, was, well, the country is meant to be doing it by 2050. So there's no point in saying, let's do it by 2050, because that's going to happen anyway, in theory. Yeah. And so that was almost where that number came from, was just, well, let's do better. And then that felt realistic, but without any actual data. So I do take that on board. Yeah. But I'm at least glad that it's meant that we are each year we are reporting against it, and if we're not going to meet it, then we're not, and it's a shame, but at least we have that target that we are trying to get towards.
And as we get more data, then it's a thing that's being reviewed and looked at again, question where our targets be set. Councillor Fawcett.
Yeah, I mean, I agree quite strongly with Councillor Gascoigne on this. I think for the primary reason that she's just said, that if we're going to make progress, we have to set a target. We have to set some kind of target, and we have to try and come up with a plan towards achieving that target. But it's important to recognise that we work in the context of lots of other decision-making processes at other levels, many of which we have very little control over. So whatever point we make a plan, we're doing that in the context of both the government's legislative framework and policy framework and attitude at the time. And I think it's fair to say that, in the last few years, there's been a shift at national level, that the concentration on this area of work has slipped. But there's no point in us sort of changing our policy every 6 months or a year just because the government is slipping a bit. We just need to do our best to plough on, but to understand that we're doing it in that context. And for me, I completely agree with Councillor Gascoigne. I would much rather be able to say, well, yes, the government set its targets and we're trying to be ahead of that a bit, at least a bit ahead of that. And we're more ambitious than they are. That's a good position for us to be in. And as I and others have said already in the meeting, this is still an urgent issue that we're already seeing our residents are already seeing the impact of, not least in terms of things like flooding and so on. So absolutely, it's the right thing to do.
Yes, wouldn't it be good if central government could be in place?
Yeah, I don't know if other people feel it, but I'm starting to feel see a lot more in media and about in general about denying that there is a climate emergency. There's a lot more deniers, I think, around. It seems to be becoming more mainstream. And for every flood, there seems to be somebody else saying, oh, well, it flooded in 1900 something, it flooded whenever. And I just wonder how much of a barrier, whether that's sort of international almost attitude, and the fact it's seems to be becoming more acceptable to deny climate change, whether that is being a barrier locally.
I think it will be.
I don't know if it.
Yeah, no, I think it will be, but that's not to say that we have got our own target, our own impetus to drive this forward, and we will do our best. But that is set in a context, nationally, internationally, that it may not be such a priority. But I think, yes, we have our target. We have what we can do to impact on that target, and I think we've got the resolution around the table that will allow us to move forward with that target.
Yeah, I also wanted to really add is, do we have a role here in more education? Through our sort of comms about this is what we're doing, this is what you could do, what we can do locally. So just sort of thoughts.
I think that's what Councillor James was suggesting earlier, and I was just going to ask Dom perhaps for comments on what we are doing in terms of what Councillor James has suggested, what we can do, and any thoughts really.
Yeah, I mean, what we are doing is all set out in the Nature and Climate Action Plan, which the Cabinet approved earlier this year. And it is largely around changing behaviours and where we can, pointing people in the direction of the correct grant funding so they can decarbonise their houses and anything we can do to bring these things to people's attention, help them to sort of bridge the gap between their maybe what they want to do and what they can afford to do. So it's all set out in the Nature and Climate Action Plan, really. But it is very largely about influencing people's behaviours.
Just
on the point about the public, I think it is certainly the case that there is a lot more noise, particularly in social media, from people who are climate change deniers. But in fact, public understanding of climate change being a result of human activity is about 2/3 of people believe that. And of the rest, they split between people who think climate change is a problem, but it's not necessarily human activity, and people who deny it's happening at all. And I think it's one of those issues where the sort of noise of the culture war it often gives an impression that there is more scepticism than there actually is. And I'm pretty sure that if it's 66% of the UK population, which is the figure I'm quoting, then it's probably a high percentage of Vale residents, given the number of Vale residents who are scientists and hold several degrees and so on.
Yeah. And although I gave sort of the dark view, in the media on a couple of days ago, the world renewable energy had overtaken coal in terms of use. So yeah, sometimes we can be focusing on the minutiae, and we probably need to step back a little bit and see this, this, I was about to say oil tanker going, but that's probably a bad analogy. But we can see things are moving in the right direction, and they might appear to be quite slowly. We just need to sometimes take stock and say, actually, countries, China and India, for example, they are now going towards renewable, hence why coal became less of a producer for energy. So there are positives, and as long as we do our little bit, even though we're probably only 0.0000 whatever percentage of the total output, we need to do that bit.
100%. So I would ask members, are you happy to note this report?
Yeah.
And thank you very much to Dom. I think this is your last one, isn't it, Dom? Thank you very much for me. Really appreciate it.
Now go and save the planet.
Yes. Thought it out.
Yeah, get it done by the end of the day. It'd be good.
Now, thank you. We're now on to item number 14, which is the Waste Collection and Street Cleansing Contracts Board, which I believe is also Councillor Gaston.
Yeah, I'm not done yet.
But before I go to that, can I ask Candida, do you think we should discuss the confidentiality of the next two items now and just see if members would
yeah, so it obviously you could just check if anybody wants to.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So the next two items have potentially have sections that are confidential. Now, if we do need to speak to those, we will have to go into confidential session. I believe that Robert can stay as a member of the council. So if you want to stay,
I'm hungry anyway, so don't worry.
okay. Are you sure you don't want to stay? Thank you very much for joining us. Yeah, so I was just wanted to check around the table. Obviously, we can go into confidential session, but I just thought it'd be easier now if we say, does anybody know that they're going to speak about the confidential sections and these are the next two items? So probably not. Or
No, I don't know what I'm going to say.
okay, well, we can, if necessary, we can go into confidential session at any point. Hello, Nick.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Chair. Of course, it's a matter for members if you want to go into part two. It always is. But and you'd vote on it in the usual way, and Candy's got the little script to do that if you needed to. One observation is that the other council, South, last night, they had a discussion and did go into part two on the basis that it didn't restrict them and they couldn't accidentally slip into things which were challenging to discuss in a more abstract or careful way. It's completely a matter for you. If the public transparency element of it is felt by your members to be more important, you can stay in here, but you will be on guard if you like. If you think that actually to ensure you can debate it in detail, you want to go into part two, that's a matter for you. It kind of depends what's in the minds of your members, but of course, equally, if you're getting to a point where you're starting to find it challenging to do it, you can call a stop as chair and say, look, do we need a vote now, and chop back in. But you can do it either way, and I'm not trying to direct you in either direction.
Thank you. Do pop up if you think it is going in the direction, but I think we will crack on. Is that okay? Because I do think there is a lot of detail in the reports coming to us. So I will go ahead and then we'll see if we need to go into confidential session at any point. So, Councillor Gascoigne, would you like to introduce the waste collection?
Love to. Yeah, thank you. So it's quite a lengthy introduction because, as you say, it's quite a detailed report, quite an important matter that we have to consider today. So I'm going to get into a bit of the detail now. Please bear with me. The collection of household waste and recycling, collection of litter and cleanliness of our streets are some of the most visible and valued services that the council provides to its residents. The council, as you all know, has provided these services well and is currently one of the councils near the top of the recycling table, sitting fourth amongst English councils. We regularly survey our residents and they tell us they are generally happy with the way services, although that more could be done to ensure that roads, especially major routes such as the A34, are litter free. Since 2009, the council, jointly with South, has provided these services through a contract with a major waste management company, that is BIFA. This contract was due to finish in 2024, but was extended by 2 years whilst the council considered its options. Last October, the Cabinet reviewed a report which considered the options for a service provision and decided to procure a new contract. Officers developed a specification for that new contract, which took into account the various legislative and operational changes. It's important to stress that the new contract will be different from what we currently have. Some of this was driven by constraints, such as the ending of the availability of the current depot column, and some driven by the desire to have flexibility for future changes. The procurement of a new contract does not in itself mean that how residents put out their bins or what goes in them will change from the start of the new contract. However, having a stable way to provide these services will enable future changes, some of which are required by law, to be delivered as and when agreed by councillors. The procurement process began back in February this year. It was a two-stage process, initially having 7 companies who were interested in providing the service. This was reduced to a short list of 4 who were all given the information required to submit a formal bid. We received the bids in July of this year. They were assessed by officers for quality and cost, and a recommendation of the preferred bidder and their bid is put forward in the confidential Appendix 1 of this report. Crucial that the Cabinet are aware that until the decision has been taken by both councils, the procurement process cannot be formally concluded and the contract awarded. Therefore, the name of the winning bidder and the details of their bid must remain confidential and not discussed in this meeting, unless we go into a confidential session, which we talked about. And they'll remain confidential until such a point as officers guide us that a public announcement can be made. Financial analysis of the recommended bid shows that compared to the anticipated budget envelope, there is a need to increase the budget by approximately £461,000 per full contract year. This budget change requires approval by full council, and both councils will need to approve specific decisions in order for the award of the new contract to proceed. I think it's important to say what those sort of broadly what the reasons are why the contract is higher. You may wish to ask further detailed questions about that. But some of the factors include the change in national insurance and the introduction of the real living wage, so it increases costs. The need to maintain flexibility of the contract end date for a future authority. So that brings us back again to local government reorganisation. The necessary need to break down the current arrangement into a number of separate contracts, and the desire to improve services in street cleansing. Officers feel that considering all factors, including risk, this represents the best option for this council. So in summary, the officer team from a wide range of departments led by the Deputy Chief Executive Place have worked together to bring forward the recommendation that we accept the proposed contract that would start from the end of June 2026. By accepting this, it will enable the council to reassure residents that services will continue and improve over forthcoming years. So I recommend this report.
Thank you very much. And as I am sure you all know, that this is one of the most vital services, if not the most vital service we provide to our residents, and it is something that we really need to make sure that we get right and that there is continuity of service throughout. And I am really happy that officers have enabled this and worked so hard to make sure that this runs as smoothly as it has done and hopefully will do. So I'm asking everybody for questions and comments, noting again the need for confidentiality and no mention of actual bidders. Anyone?
just say, oh, well, I've read the reports, it seems a very sensible way forward as far as I'm concerned. It's unfortunate that it's going to cost us more, but that's the usual way of things, isn't it?
Please, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, clearly, I don't want to spend any more money than same as you. I don't want to spend more than we have to. I think we are in an unfortunate timing. It's timing really is the worst bit here, because ideally what we want to do is let a contract for the duration of this council and not have to commit a future the unitary council to any particular contract. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out. If you go out to the companies and say we would like to let a contract for 2.5 years or 3 years, as opposed to the 7 or 10 years which they would normally go to, that's usually based on sort of the life of the vehicles, about 7 years, between 7 and 10 years. So usually they would expect a minimum of 7 years. If you ask them to just bid then for 2 years or 3 years, that level of uncertainty, presumably is going to make them increase their cost, because they're going to pay off, they're going to charge us for the risk they're carrying. So we can't do that. But equally, I think what this does is having the period of the initial contract plus the review then gives us, to some degree, a level of flexibility with the companies to say, sorry, us, I'm talking about the unitary council, the ability to then say, how do we want to do this now across whatever that unitary looks like, which is, well, whatever the solution is, it's going to be larger than just South and Vale. So, I'm satisfied that I think we are meeting our best value requirements. Am I happy that it's going to cost us about £500,000 extra each year? Well, no. And we're going to have the challenge as we go through the budget round to work out where we find that additional money, because it's not coming through the government settlement.
If I may, it's fair to say I think the last contract that we had was exceptionally good. Dick Robot negotiated where it was. I'm not convinced that they've necessarily made an awful lot of money out of us, if any at all, actually. So I think we are where we are, and although it's obviously disappointing that we did spend more taxpayers' money, it is inevitable, and it can still be considered to be good.
Any further comments? So I'd like to thank officers and ask if we can agree. Sorry.
I would recommend reading out the recommendation.
Okay.
Well.
Yeah,
This one.
I will do that. Haley and Brain. So the recommendations that Cabinet recommends the full council that additional funds as outlined in paragraph 23-24 be made available within the relevant budget to enable the relevant contract's financial obligations to be fulfilled. B, subject to full council agreeing the additional funds, approve the awarding of the waste collection and street cleansing contract as outlined in confidential appendix 1. Oh, that's going to be 2. Just going to be another one. As this will be a contract let jointly with South to commence on 29th of June 2026. The award of the joint contract is dependent upon reciprocal approval by South. So, given those recommendations, can I have a proposer?
Yeah, I can propose, yeah.
And a seconder? Okay. And we all agree.
Agree.
Thank you very much. Then we go on to item number 15, which is also has confidential sections. So just reminding you of that. It's the report on the Hazley Trading Estate is going to be introduced by Councillor Crawford, and I'll hand over to you.
Indeed. It's not going to having a waste contract without having a waste depot, is it?
That would increase the cost of the contract. I
So I'm pleased to present this item. Actually, I'm not that pleased because it's asking for more money, but there you go. Concerning delivery of a new waste vehicle depot at Hazley Trading Estate. This is a vital infrastructure project that supports our statutory responsibilities, arguably our most high-profile statutory responsibility, and contributes to several of our strategic priorities. Colleagues remember that Cabinet and Council approved the purchase of the trading estate in late 24 in response to the planned redevelopment of the column number 1 site, which currently serves as our waste depot. And since then, officers have made significant progress, including completion of the site purchase, development of detailed RIBA Stage 4 designs, submission of a full planning application, and completion of a compliant procurement process for design and build contractor. By way of planning update, the planning application was submitted in June 25 and was presented to the Planning Committee on Wednesday, the 8th of October. The resolution was to grant planning permission subject to completion of a legal agreement and the amendment discharge of condition, which was great news. Procurement outcome: there were 5 bids received, but only 1 was compliant. This bidder scored highly on quality, particularly in respect of social value, carbon reduction, and energy efficiency. I must say that at this point, perhaps that received 5 bids and only 1 being compliant. I did have a discussion with our Deputy Chief Executive who's here today. That's a real worry to me that we only had 1 compliant bid. And in another world, we might consider actually re-tendering. I think that would have been highly dangerous given the time constraints on the project. We know that we have a deadline by which we need to be out of the column by. And frankly, having tendered it properly in the first place, had 5 bids, only one of which was compliant, the thought of doing it again might simply end up in the same result. So I reluctantly agreed with officers that we should accept this particular bid. Although the bid exceeds the original construction budget, it includes previously excluded costs such as the necessity to upgrade the electricity network, biodiversity net gain works, and some structural improvements to the retained buildings. Officers have reviewed the procurement thoroughly and are confident in their recommendation to award the contract. The project team is awaiting final costs from the DNO, the district network operator, for upgrading the on-site substations to support future fleet electrification. And once received, these costs will be reviewed and may result in a reduction in the overall budget required for this part of the project. I think what we're doing is we're building it into the budget with the acknowledgement that perhaps we won't need to spend it, or we won't need to spend it yet. And particularly, I'm personally very keen not to spend money on something that doesn't have to be done now and could be done at the same price through retrofit, given that we don't know the likely direction of electrification of the fleet. The original capital budget was 13.6 million. Updated projections now indicated a requirement of up to 15.889 million, including increased construction costs, planning condition discharge, and additional fees and contingency. This report recommends increasing the budget envelope by 2.237 million, with Vale's share being half of that. And the contingency budget has also been increased to 700,000, which includes 150,000 for planning conditions. In addition, the report seeks delegated authority to secure leases for a contingency site that will also be split between both councils. It's important that this is a joint contract with South Oxfordshire and requires the approval of both councils. The climate impact assessment has been completed and shows a broadly positive impact. The preferred bidder demonstrated strong credentials in carbon reduction, and equality impact screening has also been completed with no adverse implications identified. Almost there. So to mitigate delivery risk, officers are actively exploring temporary depot sites to ensure continuity of service until December 2026. This additional time provides flexibility in the build programme and protects against unforeseen delays. And the report seeks delegated authority to secure leases for a contingency site with costs split equally between 2 councils. So to conclude, the project is currently one of the most significant risks on the council's risk register. Officers have taken a proactive approach to manage delays and ensure continuity of service. and the recommendations in the report are essential to maintain momentum and deliver a critical piece of infrastructure to support our statutory waste services. I commend the team for their work and recommend Cabinet supports the recommendations set out in this report. And I think you probably need to read out the individual recommendations. But I'll leave it now. I'm happy to have build any questions.
Thank you. So, can I ask for questions or comments?
Yeah. So you mentioned about so one of the things that's been talked about today, and you also mentioned in your introduction there, was about preparing the site for what our future fleet might be. And obviously we don't know what that is, and technology is changing all the time. So is some of this extra money that needs to be allocated, like to what extent is that accounting for those sorts of things, like installing charge points or you know, hydrogen tanks and things like that? Because
I'll actually defer to officers on the technical side, on the detailed technical side, but I understand that part of the budgeted costs includes a much greater power delivery to the site, which would be needed were the whole fleet to be electrified. Yeah, I'm glad that Suzanne's nodding here. That may or may not be required. My question to officers when we met earlier was, if the cost of putting that in is the same if we do it in 2 years' time when we know the answer to whether we need electrification or not, happy to have it in the budget. Don't actually let's do it until we know we need it, as long as that isn't going to in some way impact the delivery of the electrification if we choose to go down that road. So yes, there's a chunk of money here that is earmarked for greater power to the site to allow full electrification. Did you want to add to that, Andrew?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Crawford. So yeah, the request to the DNO is to increase the KVA capacity from 1,000 kVA to 2,000 kVA, which is significant to power a number of the fleet to electric vehicles, as well as the electric charges which are required from OCC as part of a planning condition for staff vehicles. So we obviously have to account for that as well. We've early indications are that the main incoming cable can cope with the 2,000 kVA, and then the cost would be for just upgrading the transformer on site. So significant amount of power already on at this location, but we're looking to double that, hopefully without the need to replace the main incoming cable, which should reduce costs. And obviously as soon as we get receipt of those the quotation, they will be reviewed to update the budget accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Fawcett, you had your hand up?
Again, just I'm generally in support of this. I think it's inevitable with this kind of contract that with, you know, when you start the process, you set out your best educated guess at what you think the overall cost is going to be, but it's not until you see the tenders and we've heard about the challenges of that process that you actually end up knowing that. I think the question for me in terms of making a decision is that if we had been presented with this total figure when we started the process, would we have still come to the conclusion that it was the best way to do things? And I'm pretty sure we would have done, because the variance in terms of the sort of percentage is not actually that great for this kind of contract. So I'm quite content that we've been through a proper process. It's been a challenging one for the reasons that have been set out, but we would still have come to the same conclusion. I'm pretty certain. So again, it's always slightly annoying when you're going to be spending more on something than you had hoped, but this is very reasonable proposal, and I'm happy to support it.
Am I allowed to ask officers what the decision of South Oxfordshire District Council was last week?
Yes, so they supported the paper.
Yeah.
They subject to their council signing off.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any further questions or comments?
Yeah. So I've just got one on local government reorganisation. So the previous paper that we looked at, the one that was under my portfolio about the contract, was clearly has very affected by local government organisation, because it needs flexibility in the contract, and we might want to change things in future and all that sort of stuff, actually for reasons other than local organisation as well. But in terms of the paper that we're looking at here in terms of location, just to confirm my understanding that whether we have whatever council we have in the future, we will still need a depot that's in this kind of location that sort of covers this sort of area. And so, yeah, I don't know, I just wondered to what extent local government organisation has been part of the decision-making process here, whether it really needed to be, because we'll always need to collect waste here, whoever is in charge of doing that.
Can you go to Nick? This is
Yeah, I want. Sorry, Nick.
Nick. Or is he Grayson?
I'm just very slow moving, Chair. I'm sorry. So it's a good question, but members will be aware that the more choice you've got about something, to do it or not to do it, the more impactful local government reorganisation is. But you've hit the nail on the head. Because this is a function which will need to be carried on by whichever organisation exists in the future, it has a lower impact upon the contract than otherwise. There are impacts we did have to consider, and the lawyers and Mr. Fielding and his team have had to consider things like building in flexibility as much as we can in case there was scope to make changes in the future. But it's very limited on a contract of this kind. But officers will continually review all major contracts, all major spend, to try and make sure that they are at least not problematic to LGR. It's an uncertain time, but this is one of those ones where you can say, look, this is going to have to happen. We don't really have a choice about it. We can't cut our cloth here. There is a specific set of requirements under the Health Acts and so on about how we do it, the Recycling Acts. So you can kind of put it from your mind a bit, but be aware that what we need to do to build in, break clauses and flexibility and so on, that has been done. So I hope that's helpful enough. If any of your members want a sort of more detailed discussion on it, then obviously they can just get in touch with me after the meeting.
Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Crawford.
I think the truth of the matter is, Haley, that we don't know what the shape of our organisations are going to look like in the future. There's various options on the table, aren't there? Which might see a whole Oxfordshire. It might see the Ridgeway Council. Do I think that the Ridgeway, for example, would only have one waste depot across the whole area? Probably not. Can I guarantee that Great Hazley will be needed in the longer term for the waste depot for whatever shape of council we have? No, I can't do that either. I guess the advantage with this is that we're buying a freehold property that has a value. There were other bidders at the time we bought it, so we know that even if in extremis, some point in the medium future that it's not needed anymore, it's an asset for whatever council then owns it.
I think also, we came up with a strategy for waste collection that involved setting up a waste and street cleansing contract, a dry mix recycling contract, delivery of a depot, delivery of a waste transfer station. And that was our view that was the most cost effective and best mechanism for meeting our statutory requirements. Then LGR came in, but we were already heading down a particular route. And so to then, it's quite right that we should consider, should we be proceeding with the waste depot? But to some degree, you're already on that stage, and to then say no, we're not, would then jeopardise those other things, and that. The world being the way it is, that's not going to come in at less cost. It's going to come in at greater cost because you're, between a rock and a hard place. So, I think that, had we been making these decisions, I don't know, 5 years ago, knowing that LGR was coming in, then we might well be thinking slightly differently. But the point was, we weren't. We've already made our strategy and proceeded, including effectively less than some fairly big contracts.
Yeah, and I think I just wanted to understand the impact that the thing is having on all of our decisions, but you've all answered that very well. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Now we go to the recommendations then, and I shall read them out. The Cabinet A recommends to Council to proceed with increasing the capital budget envelope by 2.3 million to provide a total budget, of 15.9 million, with 50% of this total budget being the Council's share of the costs associated with delivering the waste vehicle depot and making it operational within the required timeframes. B, subject to Council approval of the increased budget envelope, award the JCT design and build contract to the preferred bidder to deliver the vehicle depot on the Hazley trading estate. C, delegates to the head of development and corporate landlord in consultation with the head of finance and head of legal to approve terms and conditions to directly award contract to the district network operator, DNO, for an upgraded electricity connection. And D, delegates to the head of development and corporate landlord in consultation with the head of finance and head of legal authorities to secure a temporary vehicle depot site as a contingency plan and enter into the necessary leases and any ancillary agreements which will bind the council jointly with jointly with South. Can we amend that? Of course. Thank you. For an agreed period to be funded from contingency if required. So barring that minor change.
Opposed.
Yeah, you're proposing, Councillor Crawford, seconding.
Second.
Councillor Fawcett is seconding, and are we all agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And thank you very much. And thank you to officers in the room and online and for all members present. Thank you. And I will draw this meeting to a conclusion without having to go into confidential session. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you.